Like I said, I sent this Parent Square back on September 25th, but not everyone checks Parent Square. That's totally fine. But StoryCon is a really, really big deal. So I'm going to share some of the knowledge with you that I learned from these awesome published authors. But I also wanted to make it clear, like I have that poster over there. It's on the door. It's on the counter. If you do become interested, like we did this in third period, and 10 different people are like, I am going. I did get an email from the StoryCon people last week. They only have 60 tickets left because they do. It's a huge convention center, but that's how many kids love StoryCon, and that's how many kids are already going. And I know personally of so far 12 Albion students who are going, so just so you know, you wouldn't be the only one. Your job, what you are supposed to do, you have a blank Google Doc open. Go ahead and add bullet points to your Google Doc. So I'm going to be walking around today because, number one, I'm going to make sure no one tries to sneak having a cell phone out. If you do, fair warning, cell phones I would take and give it to the office, and then you have to pick it up and it goes on your official records, and it counts as one of your official times that you got it taken away. Also, like, no music today, but your job on your Google Doc, do not write complete sentences. You're just going to make a really not full sentence list of 20 tips or tricks that you actually thought were helpful. I will say third period made it into a contest, and they're going to get so many coins. You only have to do 20, and each of the bullet points could be like 2 words. But so many kids found so many of these tips and tricks really helpful that one kid did 57, and he was like starting to like brag the more he got. And then one girl was like, well, I got 90. So definitely keep going. Like if there's other tips and tricks that you like beyond the 20, your job is to be on no other tab except your blank Google Doc. So each one of these are just a little tidbit that I learned from one of these published authors. I heard this specific piece of advice from at least 7 different authors. They were really big on nobody is as perfect as they seem they are. Like, when we see books over on the shelf, we're all like, oh, well, that creative writer is just good, and I'm not. No. So many authors were like, it's never good at the beginning. It gets good the more you actually edit and create and try and make it better. So remember, the only thing on your screen is a blank Google Doc. You're making a bullet point list of 20 tips or tricks that I'm going over right now that you like. A lot of writers also talked about how good creative writing happens because you write a lot. That sometimes people have the misconception that the perfect idea will just fall from the sky into your brain, and then you'll be the best creative writer ever. But that often isn't the case. Usually, you get really good ideas by doing writing. And so that leads to this next cool idea, which is a page called a parking lot. We're going to do a project starting in December where this is going to be really awesome. The parking lot page is, what if I get inspiration? I'm writing a different story, but then that gives me an idea. Put it on your parking lot page so that it doesn't distract you for too long, that you're still keeping track. Do you have Google that going? Yeah. And so, like, keeping track so it doesn't get you off track is kind of the idea. So there's this old creative writing adage, which means like a piece of advice. It's a really cliche piece of advice that says, write what you know. But one of the authors at this conference, she talked about, don't write what you know. That's boring. You already know it. Isn't it so much more interesting to play around with new ideas and discover something you don't already know? I liked that one. These are ones I wrote down. Like, I took notes the whole conference, not because I was getting graded on it, just because I cared, just because I thought it was good advice. So these are ones that I found personally meaningful, just so you know. This one I think is helpful as well, because we are our own worst judge, you guys. We're tough on ourselves. We want to be good, and we feel like, I can't make this perfect, therefore I shouldn't even try, and that's so not true. You should approach writing as though no one's reading it. Write for yourself. Don't write for anyone else. And that is how you get to be a really meaningful creative writer. Next is character development. Good stories are centered around good characters. So one author was talking about one of the best ways to write a story is to create an interesting character, give them something that they want. It's a deeply important, personal, important thing. And the whole story comes from them not getting that thing that they want. Just keep them from getting it as long as you can and then end the story. But most creative writers, that's actually how they write a story. Here's a character, here's the thing they want, I'm going to keep them from getting it, I'm going to keep them from getting it, I'm going to keep them from getting it, and the resolution comes when I finally let them have the thing. Or I kill them off, right? Depending on how happy or sad your story is. You're doing great, you guys. So this is a small bit, but sometimes having like kind of secret hidden messages, for example, having a character's name that has meaning, you don't even have to tell the reader what it is. You kind of leave that there for the reader to figure out. Like, for example, Professor Umbridge in Harry Potter, the word Umbridge is a real word. It means like full of hate. And that's exactly what that character is. So her name is actually meaningful, but not everyone catches on to that. But for the readers who do catch on to it, it's kind of cool. This is a really easy way of doing a plot line. I heard a lot of authors say this exact same thing, which shows me that it's good advice. They said, okay, create a character, give them something they want, but something keeps them from getting it, so they have to react in a certain way. Then they try something else, and then you've got resolution. That's a really easy plot. And remember, you don't have to be writing every single one of these things down. Write down the ones you like, and ignore the advice that you don't like. Okay, but keep going on that Google Doc. You guys are doing awesome. I think that good creative writing, and lots of authors talked about this one, it should leave a question in the reader's mind. You don't need to answer all the questions, guys. Good writing makes people stop and think. And so you know you did your job when the reader is thinking about it when they're trying to fall asleep and it's still stuck in their head and there's questions that they are just burning to get answered. It's a good way to approach writing. Because when they put down their story and they're still thinking about it, like I said, it means you did your job. So these were, one author talked about really common mistakes that creative writers your age, they talked about here's what to avoid. So number one, people who start before the actual start. That sometimes we focus on things that don't actually matter in the story. Like a character waking up and going around about their day is so common but boring. Don't do that. Start in the middle of the action and then go back and explain stuff later. They also talked about too much dialogue is a bad thing. Too much description is a bad thing. We want to have a balance of dialogue and description. They also said, and she was really, really serious about this, she said if you ever have a character sleeping and it takes you more than one sentence, that is a huge no-no. We don't need that detail. Never describe someone sleeping or waking up unless it is critically important to the story. You guys you can skip stuff, that's not important. Also, if you are abruptly cutting off in the middle of a scene, unless it's for a reason, that's a big no-no. That's actually a common problem. So next, I just wrote this one down because this was a quote that one of the authors said, and she said, you know what inspiration really is? It's the act of forgetting where you stole your ideas. And I kind of loved that because, so when it comes to like higher level creative writing theory, there's literally a textbook for like people in college taking creative writing classes, and it's called The 7 Plot Lines. And there's this theory that there's no true stories. All stories can fit into one of these 7 plot lines. Like, for example, one of them is called The Hero's Journey. But that doesn't matter. If you're retelling a story that already exists, oh well. Because you're going to put your own spin on it. And even though there's no real, like, totally different stories that no one's seen even a version of before, that's okay, because it's actually really comforting for readers to see something that like is in their background knowledge that they sort of recognize. That's actually, it makes them feel more comfortable to see things they recognize. Paralleling is really cool. I hadn't heard this one, and it was a good aha moment for me. So this author talked about a Harry Potter example specifically, but paralleling is where you take two things in the story and make them mimic each other. because it helps the reader know what to feel. So in Harry Potter, Harry lives, when he's not at Hogwarts, he lives with his aunt and uncle, who are not good people. And when he's in their house, it's sad and horrible. And he has his owl, Hedwig, and when he's at their house, Hedwig is always in a cage. And when Harry is at Hogwarts, Hedwig the owl is free, and she can hunt when she wants, and she can fly when she wants. And that's paralleling. That we're supposed to see Hedwig caged and miserable at the Dursleys, and that's how Harry feels too. So it's very much a higher level creative writing skill, but it's really cool. Happens a lot, actually. But it's not always obvious. Like, part of our job as creative writers is to kind of do some subtle things out of focus and to leave it up to the reader to do the thinking. Okay, next one. This seems really simple, but people who want to be a good writer and aren't consistently writing, it's not going to happen. Because just like any practice you do for anything you care about, if I care about getting really good at a video game, I'm going to practice playing that game. If I care about getting really good at football, I'm going to practice playing football. It's the same with writing. Even if you're only writing 5 minutes every day, like set a timer, and if it's even only 5 minutes, that truly will make you a better writer, because the process of writing creates good writers. One author talked, this was a little hard for me to swallow, but she said, an idea isn't a plot. You don't have a story just because you had an idea. Here's what actually makes it a plot. She said it has to have these 4 things. It doesn't necessarily need to be a hero in the sense of like it's a superhero. That's not what she meant. We need a good character who has a goal, but there's an obstacle. Like I already said, right? There's an obstacle from keeping you getting that goal. And what are the consequences, good or bad, of getting that goal or not? I'm going to pause for 1 second and give everybody a coin. Yeah, it's not hard. And like I said, you should still, even if you get 20, you're not allowed to like stop and do nothing. You still need to have your Google Doc on your page. But it's really easy to get to 20, so thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to keep like trying to power through. Third period, I talked just a little bit too long. I'm trying to go faster for you guys so I can give you 10 minutes of free time at the end. Okay. I think this is just validating that even these big deal, huge authors, like people all around the world know them, all of them said it is so normal as an author to feel like, wow, this is garbage. Every author has that. So it's not that you're doing something wrong. That's just a normal feeling. World building is fun, but world building is a lot of work. If you're going to make a fake place seem real, totally done. Okay. The first lesson is how many times you're going to get rejected. I know somebody, her name is Michelle Simpson. I used to work with her at the school I taught at before Albion. She is determined to get published, but she knows that most writers, before they get published, they get denied so many times that she actually made it her goal. She is celebrating every time she gets rejected by a publisher, and so far she's been rejected about 60, I think she said 4 times. And that's normal, guys. Even J.K. Rowling, someone who's now a billionaire from her creative writing, like, it is normal to get rejected. Second thing is, I don't know, this is easier said than done, but I liked one of the authors said, your fictional world that you create, the fake world, it should feel inevitable. Like, it should feel like, oh, of course this is a thing. This just feels so meaningful. And then it's not about the place. If you build a world, a cool fictional place, and think that's enough, that's not enough, because what it's really about is what are the possibilities because of that place. It's not the place itself, it's what possibilities does the place hold. And so the last one goes back to that old adage, that write what you know is a very common piece of creative writing advice. But this one said, you want to follow the what ifs. So it's not just like writing what I know. Let me ignore that and just follow the, what are the consequences if this crazy thing happens? And that's honestly one of the reasons I love creative writing so much, is things that I would never want to happen in real life. I get to play around with those ideas in a safe place where it's not real at all, and I get to feel like I'm living a totally different life, and that's cool to me. I love this one too. Worthwhile answers, or worthwhile issues don't have easy answers. You don't have to do all the thinking for your reader. Guys, good life questions they should make us stop and think. They should make us question who we are, right? The most meaningful things in life, like love and death, right? Those big, big, meaningful moments in life, they don't always have easy answers. And that's what it means to be human, and that's okay. So the world yourself can become the answer to those unanswerable questions, right? This experiment, like something like Hunger Games, right? We don't want that to be real, but that fictional world helps people answer those unanswerable questions of how is it, like, is this an okay way to treat people? That became the answer, and that's a lot of pressure as a creative writer to know that's something you're part of. Because hard questions are supposed to make us think, right? It's very philosophical. What are the answers that are the answers to unanswerable questions? Like, what does it actually mean for someone to be evil? What makes a person truly good, right? Good writing should be kind of tackling those kinds of questions. So one author talked about, sure, it's awesome to create a cool fictional world, but that's not where the magic is. The magic is getting someone to have an emotional connection to your idea. That emotion doesn't mean like I'm just going to make my reader cry, but that they're having some sort of reaction. That your story made them actually feel something. And then one author was talking a lot about it's lazy creative writing telling your writer you should feel like this. Give them the opportunity to have the feelings, but you can't necessarily control what they're going to feel, right? You can only create the circumstance, and it's up to them to have the feelings. So don't be so obvious. Like, don't treat your reader like an idiot. Don't be so obvious. Oh, that's okay. It's when you do this much talking, you're bound to mess up. Okay. Next. If you have a big emotional moment, like Allison Tuttle in my third period, Allison came up to me on Friday and was like, Mr. Coates, like, I am having a rough time because she's been working on a novel for 3 years. And she's been building up very slowly to this moment where the main character dies. And that's a big deal for readers, but it's also a big deal for the writer. And so on moments like that, it's important that you really slow down. Give the reader a chance to feel it. Most writers will rush way more than they realize, so try not to rush too much. Okay, we need a little brain break. So just like Rochambeau last week, who was our winner? Max. Oh, Max is the one to beat. So again, I have prizes. Remember, winners, raise your hand. If you lose, you become a cheerleader. And let's stand up and wake up. Put your ticket in your pocket. Let's wake up our brains a little bit. Go, Rochambeau, someone near you. Go, go, go.
Hello, is anyone else there?
Raise your hand if you win. You Winners, find other winners. Raise your hand.
Okay, Rochambeau.
Raise your hand so they know that you're waiting for someone.
Rochambeau. I beat the winner.
Winners, raise your hand. Ken is waiting for another winner. There we go. Karana is waiting for another winner. Jake is waiting for another winner.
Let's go.
Raise your hand if you won. Okay, winners find other winners. Go, go, go.
I'm touching one.
We're down to the last couple here.
Here we go, Rochambeau.
Okay.
Rochambeau. Rochambeau.
Oh, okay, Sam. Karana, were you the winner there? Ken and Sam. It's okay. That sounds great. I think it's just you left. So Craig is on the line here. Was it Ken as the winner? Okay, Ken, it's our last fight anyway. We'll talk about prize options. Okay, everyone settle back in. Settle back in. Settle back in. Okay, next year we'll talk.
I won like 7.
Yeah, no, we're going to be at, well, we're trying to do 10 minutes every time. Okay, settle back in. subtle piece of advice, but one author talked about how she uses a lot of colors to set the emotion of a scene. If she wants the reader to feel anger, she talks about red more on purpose. Or if she wants the reader to feel a little more sad, she'll talk about blue colors a little bit more. So it's a subtle trick, but like those mind games are real in creative writing. Again, the bigger the issue, the smaller you write. Slow down. Don't rush so much on those big moments. This is another one, right? An author taking this idea, don't just write what you know. Write what you like. If you're going to be stuck with a story, like Allison, who's been working on a story for 3 years, why spend 3 years on something you don't even like? So pick something that you, literally you personally, actually enjoy. This, I think, is just a beautiful idea that fiction, something that's not real, is the study of what it means to be human, right? These answers to unanswerable questions. You'll see some of these start repeating a little bit. That's because so many authors felt strongly enough that you heard it in different places. One author talked about, it doesn't matter if you see a story that's already out there, because you're going to bring your own perspective to it. This, I think, is important. This is also a good real life lesson. You can't control how people are going to respond to your story, right? All you can do is put it out there and see what happens. But that's also a good real life lesson. If I'm fighting with someone, or if I have a disagreement with someone, I can't tell them how to feel or how to react. I can only control me. I can't control you. And that's a little scary as an artist. That's what we're doing. I can only control the pages on the page. I can't tell you how to feel about it, or the words on the page. So this was a beautiful moment, but this was tough. This author, he had the whole audience. I mean, we were truly in tears. It was hard, but it was so meaningful. So I'm going to show you his books. Brandon Mole was at the conference, and Brandon Mole wrote Fablehaven, and he talked about how if your story, like, if it truly only means something to at least one person, at least it meant something to one person. And he talked about a Make-A-Wish child who he had the opportunity to give them their dying wish. It was so sad, but he talked about this kid who loved Fablehaven, and it was their favorite thing. Like how I feel about cats and Harry Potter, that was this kid in Fablehaven. And this kid had cancer and was actually dying, and he knew he would never get the ending. So his Make-A-Wish that was granted by that foundation was to be able to find out what actually happens in that series. And Brandon Mole talked about how it was one of the hardest things he had ever done, but he talked about how meaningful it was to him as a creative writer, that he wrote a story because he liked it and he loves creative writing, but he didn't realize how much of an impact it could make on someone's life. And that's precious. That's like such a cool thing to be able to say, I mattered to someone that much that it was literally their dying wish. I think that's inspirational. It's sad, but it's inspirational. This one I really think is so important. So something like Cinder, when I first heard of Cinder, which, by the way, if you haven't read, is one of my favorite series. It's fascinating. It takes the story of Cinderella. We all know Cinderella, but it does something so new and so different that when I first heard Cinder, when the person who explained it to me, she was like, okay, so this is going to sound crazy. It's Cinderella, but she's a cyborg? And I was like, that sounds like garbage. And then I saw how popular Cinder was getting, and I finally gave in, and I finally read it. But it was so awesome, right? Because I already had that background knowledge. I knew Cinderella, and they did something so different and so new. It was shocking in the best way. So that's a great way to get story ideas. And also, one author talked about how she truly actually wants to make the world a better place. So she doesn't write. For her, she decided she didn't want to write the kind of stories that are like death and gore and dying all the time. She wanted to make the thing she's remembered by the stories that light up people's life. Because if you feel lighter and happy because of it, so will your reader. And I thought that was admirable. Using old ideas when you're stuck is totally valid, you guys. Like, what if I'm trying to write, I got nothing, and the inspiration isn't coming, the creativity isn't flowing? Why not take an old story and see if I can breathe new life into it, Adam? That just because it didn't work in the past doesn't mean it couldn't work now. Minor elements of other stories, turning them into something new. It's basically fan fiction, but like, if you love a story, Someone tell me a really minor character from like Avengers. Tell me what's him.
The random guy sitting in the background where the car is flying over his head.
What if I turn his story into a whole story, right? Like, we're gonna dig deep and see what makes that dude human and why his story matters, right? That's totally a way of getting story inspiration. The one author talked about, if you're constantly feeling like you're forcing the idea, it's not gonna be very exciting to your reader. So if it's too forced, it probably means it's time to abandon it. Having moments, having days where it feels a little forced is okay, but if it's like months and months and months and you're just forcing it, abandon. Again, like so many authors talked about how way too many stories, that's a common pitfall for new writers. If I'm boiling water, I don't want those big rolling bubbles. I just want a bare simmer, and that's how stories should be as well. Take your time. If you have to convince yourself to write it for months at a time, it's not exciting enough. If it's just a battle with yourself, Jade focus bud. So one way to overcome, because rising action is the hardest part, you guys, that the middle of novels are really hard to write. So one way to overcome that struggle is purposefully plan something that you know is coming up, that you can look forward to writing it, and give yourself that little gift of, I know the middle is going to be tough, so here's something I'm excited about. Almost done, you guys. It's really, really, really true. There's no wrong way to write a book. You do not have to have a college degree to write a book. You don't have to take creative writing to write a book. Writing is for everyone. And everyone is going to put their own spin and their own twist on it. That's how it's supposed to work. Another author, I know it's repetitive, but that shows you how important it was. If I heard it multiple times, another author said, don't actually start at the beginning, that's so boring. Start in something that's interesting and will grab their attention. Emerson Crouch in third period, last week, Fingers Keepers, Emerson last week, he talked about how he hates but he loves when he's reading a book and he knows he's supposed to go to bed, but then he finishes the chapter and then something so good happens at the end of the chapter that he keeps staying awake. And I was like, Emerson, that's happening on purpose. The authors are purposely doing that because they're smart. That hooks don't just come at the beginning, you guys. End a chapter, purposefully end it with a hook so that you keep your reader coming back for more. If there's 8 billion people in the world, that means there's 8 billion perspectives. So just because someone else might have written a story that's similar to yours, that doesn't matter. You're going to bring your own experience to it. Tropes. Tropes are a very advanced kind of idea, but tropes are, I'm trying to think of the right word, stereotypes. Okay, so a specific trope in like rom-com, like romantic comedy stories, is the enemies to falling in love story. It's a really common story, and the reason why it doesn't matter that it's such a common stereotype is people like it anyways. It's comfortable to them, right? They notice that pattern. We can see these two characters, they hate each other, but I know, based on the trope, based on the stereotype, they're going to end up together, and that's okay. They're the building blocks of stories. You don't actually have to explain quite as much as you think you do. Really and truly, readers are smarter than people give them credit for, so give them enough that they understand, but don't think you have to be explaining every single tiny little moment. And again, don't freak out if the story idea you're working on has already been written. You're going to do it in your own way. One author talked about how so many creative writers fall into the trap of thinking editing is super scary. But this author, actually it was a whole team of authors, they talked about how that's actually their favorite part. Because kind of like word vomiting the story out, that's hard. But once the story is out there, the magic is in the making it better. And they said that actually is their favorite bit of creative writing. If the characters feel real to you, they're going to feel real to the audience. Plus, it's going to make you want to tell their story that much more. Like when Allison killed off her character in her story, it was hard because she's been working on this character for 3 years and had to say goodbye. And even though they're totally fake, it felt like a real emotional thing. Sometimes writing just isn't fun. So like just knowing that and being like, you know what, I'm going to do it anyways, and sticking with it, that's what's going to make a better writer. I forgot the memes I put Eavesdropping. Most professional authors walk around with notebooks all the time because making really good dialogue is so much harder than people realize. So they write down little snippets of conversations that they hear and use them in future stories because we want our characters to talk like real people talk. So eavesdropping, like in airports, and then next time you're on an airplane, right? Those places where you can really practice what a real person sounds like. Let me give everyone another coin. I want to make sure you know I really do appreciate that you're trying to listen. We really are almost done here. Okay. Keep taking notes on the ones you like. Ignore the ones you don't. One author talked about how a lot of writers won't do anything that's like too lovey-dovey because they're afraid that people will think their writing is cringy. And she said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do it. I like it, and that's all that matters. And I thought that was meaningful. One author talked about how creative writing is art. It's not visual, but it's still art. And it's brave to create something and hope that other people will like it. And that it's a big deal. One author talked about just give yourself permission. So what if I'm not the best writer in the world? If I enjoy it and it's something that's meaningful to me, that's what matters. And that don't let someone tell you what to like. That's such a common problem in our society that we get people on social media who are telling us to think a certain way or the only life that's meaningful is a certain thing. Don't let someone tell you what to enjoy. There's somebody in my third period, her jam is anything to do with the Renaissance. Like, that is truly what brings joy to her heart. Me? Not so much, right? Just because Cats and Harry Potter are my jam doesn't mean it has to be your jam. But, give yourself permission to own that thing. And that it is yours. No one's allowed to tell you how to think. So this was a really cool moment because there was a whole panel of authors talking about how to write, good love stories. Because there's lots of, dumb love stories. And this brave teenage boy, he was 16 years old. They had a question and answer moment. And this kid, I was impressed. It was like an almost totally female audience. And this kid was brave enough to ask a question that, people were like, you know what? That was a good question. He said, if I'm a 16-year-old boy and I'm trying to write, girls and make it actually believable, how? And you could tell the panel of authors, he kind of threw them for a loop. They were like, this was such a good question, and here's their answer. They said, you have to treat them like a real person, and what makes someone real is their imperfections, because real humans are not perfect. So give those characters imperfections and a real issue, because no one has a perfect life. We all have things we deal with, right? So I loved that. This is the last bit. So this is a little ridiculous. This is another book that I had to get talked into reading. My older sister, Lisa, she is obsessed with this series. It's called The Discworld. It is fantasy that turns fantasy on its head. Because you get a lot of fantasy that's kind of like Lord of the Rings, where it's very, kind of highfalutin fancy. And there's a time and a place for that. But this guy is this British dude who took these cliches in writing and in the fantasy world and just made it fun because that's what he enjoyed. My sister, when she explained this to me, she's like, well, it's this weird world where they're floating through space on the back of a turtle. And I was like, are you high? Legitimately, this sounds insane. What? Why would I read that? And then she convinced me. She was like, no, just trust me. And I started reading this series. And it is hilarious. He takes all these fantasy cliches and totally just has fun with them and does weird stuff with them. And I love that. It is seriously one of my favorite series. This is the last piece of advice, which I think truly, truly, truly matters. You'll hear this from almost every single very famous author, that good writers read a lot. Because we're trying to get inspiration. We're trying to steal good strategies from each other. So not just sticking to one type of reading. That I purposely force myself to read things that don't really go with my personality. And I do that on purpose because I know it expands my skills as a writer and also makes me a better human if I think about other perspectives that are different than my own. So good writers read a lot, you guys. That is the end. I hope you got at least a few things that made you think about writing in a different way. Turn in your list. You get free time, and feel free to move around and sit where you want and have some free time for the last 10 minutes. Thanks, you guys. That was a lot of sitting and listening. I appreciate it. Yeah.